This broadcast is dedicated to showing you the unvarnished reality of our courts and streets. Expect nothing less than unfiltered, unedited, and exceptionally raw footage. We place you directly on the front lines of justice, delivering the facts without any distortion.
License and registration! Step out of the vehicle! This car was reported stolen!
Officer, I'm Senior Chief Petty Officer Darnell Washington. This is my vehicle. It's registered in my name. I have my license.
I don't care!
Here.
Step out! Now!
I've served this...
Officer Kevin Hartley thought he knew exactly what he was looking at. A brand new Dodge Challenger SRT Hellcat, midnight black with factory chrome wheels, rumbling through the upscale Riverside Heights neighborhood at 2:47 p.m. on a sunny Saturday afternoon. And behind the wheel, a black man. In Hartley's mind, the equation was simple. That car didn't belong to that driver. Stolen vehicle. Had to be. He ran the plates from 3 car lengths back, his patrol car's computer pulling up the registration in seconds. The results came back clean. Vehicle registered to a Darnell Washington, address in Riverside. No warrants, no flags, nothing suspicious whatsoever. A reasonable officer would have let it go. But Hartley wasn't reasonable. He was convinced his instincts were sharper than any database, that his 11 years on the force had given him an eye for who belonged in certain neighborhoods and who didn't. He followed anyway, maintaining distance, waiting for a reason to pull the Challenger over, a wide turn, a moment of hesitation at a stop sign, anything. But the driver was flawless, signaling every lane change, stopping fully at every intersection, obeying every traffic law with precision that suggested military discipline. What Hartley didn't know, what he couldn't have imagined in his narrow worldview, was that the man behind the wheel was Senior Chief Petty Officer Darnell Washington, a decorated 18-year Navy SEAL veteran with 3 combat deployments, 2 Bronze Stars, and a Purple Heart. Darnell was returning home from Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, still wearing his Navy dress blue uniform complete with ribbons and medals, because he'd attended a promotion ceremony for a fellow SEAL that morning. And what Hartley had completely forgotten, in his determination to prove his assumptions right, was that his body camera was activated and recording every moment of his pursuit, every decision he was about to make, every word he was about to speak. The device clipped to his chest was capturing everything in high-definition video with crystal-clear audio, creating a permanent record of what would become one of the most damning examples of racial profiling his department had ever seen. Senior Chief Petty Officer Darnell Washington had earned everything he had, every ribbon on his chest, every dollar in his bank account, every horsepower in the Hellcat he was driving home that afternoon. Born and raised in Riverside, California, Darnell had enlisted in the Navy at 18, the son of a postal worker and a school nurse who had taught him that discipline and excellence were the answers to every obstacle America might put in his path. He'd survived BUD, S training, the brutal selection process that eliminated 80% of SEAL candidates. He'd completed 3 combat deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq. He'd been awarded 2 Bronze Stars for valor and a Purple Heart after taking shrapnel to his left shoulder during an extraction mission in Fallujah. At 39, he was one of the most respected operators in his unit, a senior enlisted leader who trained the next generation of SEALs with the same uncompromising standards that had kept him alive through 18 years of service. His men would have followed him anywhere. Many had. The Hellcat was his reward to himself. After his last deployment, after watching 2 teammates come home in flag-draped coffins, Darnell had walked into a dealership and paid cash for the car he'd dreamed about since he was a teenager, sketching muscle cars in his notebook. Midnight black, 717 horsepower, the kind of machine that announced you had made it, that you had survived. He'd been married to his high school sweetheart, Simone, for 15 years. They had 2 daughters, Kayla, 12, and Destiny, 8, who were waiting for him at home with plans for a barbecue dinner. He was still wearing his dress blues because the promotion ceremony that morning had run long, and he hadn't wanted to waste time changing when his family was expecting him. The uniform was immaculate, his ribbons arranged in perfect regulation order, his SEAL Trident Warfare insignia gleaming above his left pocket, his Senior Chief collar devices polished that morning. Anyone who looked at him would see exactly what he was: a man who had dedicated his life to serving his country. But when those red and blue lights flashed in his rearview mirror, Darnell felt the same cold dread that every black man in America knows. The uniform wouldn't protect him. The medals wouldn't matter. In that moment, he was just a black man being pulled over by police, and his survival would depend on how carefully he managed the next few minutes. Hartley activated his lights at 2:52 p.m., the red and blue strobes reflecting off the Challenger's glossy black paint. His body camera recorded the timestamp, the location, the moment everything began. Darnell pulled over immediately, guiding the Hellcat to the curb with the same precision he applied to everything in his life. Before the car had fully stopped, his hands were on the steering wheel, 10 and 2, fingers spread wide where they could be clearly seen. It was a habit his father had drilled into him 3 decades ago, sitting in the driveway of their modest home, rehearsing the movements that might one day save his life. Hands visible, no sudden movements. Yes, sir, no, sir. Survive the encounter. Hartley's body camera captured his approach from behind, his right hand resting on his holstered weapon, his posture aggressive. The afternoon sun was bright, the video quality crystal clear, every detail preserved. License and registration, Hartley said, his voice carrying the flat authority of a man who expected immediate compliance. He hadn't said good afternoon, hadn't explained the reason for the stop. His camera recorded his own shadow falling across the driver's window as he leaned in. Step out of the vehicle. Darnell's hands remained on the wheel. His voice was calm, controlled, the voice of a man who had maintained composure under enemy fire. Officer, can you tell me why I'm being stopped? This vehicle was reported stolen. Hartley's response was immediate, confident, captured with perfect clarity on the body camera's audio. Step out of the vehicle now. The lie hung in the air between them. The vehicle had not been reported stolen. Hartley had run the plates himself 5 minutes earlier and knew the registration was clean. There was no report, no alert, no flag of any kind. He had fabricated probable cause on the spot, inventing a justification that his own earlier computer search had already disproven. And his body camera recorded every word. Darnell's jaw tightened, visible even through the window on the body camera footage. Officer, I'm a senior chief petty officer in the United States Navy. This is my vehicle. It's registered in my name. I have my license and registration right here. I don't care what you say you are. Out of the car, now. Officer Kevin Hartley had worn a Riverside Police Department badge for 11 years. In that time, he had accumulated 7 formal complaints from citizens alleging racial profiling, discriminatory enforcement, and harassment during traffic stops. Every single complaint had been reviewed by Internal Affairs. Every single complaint had been dismissed as unsubstantiated. His supervisors described him in performance reviews as aggressive but effective, praising his willingness to make stops that other officers might hesitate on, celebrating his arrest numbers without examining who those arrests targeted. He had received 3 commendations for proactive policing. No one in the department's leadership had ever questioned why his proactive policing seemed to focus so heavily on Black and Latino drivers. The internal records told a story that the department had chosen to ignore. Over the past 5 years, Hartley had conducted 847 traffic stops. Statistical analysis would later reveal that 68% of those stops involved drivers of color, despite the fact that Riverside's population was only 41% non-white. Even more damning, 73% of his stops involving black drivers in vehicles valued over $40,000 resulted in searches, compared to just 12% of stops involving white drivers in comparable vehicles. 3 years earlier, a black accountant named Jerome Patterson had filed a lawsuit against Hartley after being pulled over, removed from his BMW at gunpoint, and held face down on the pavement for 45 minutes while officers searched his car without consent or warrant. They found nothing. Patterson had been driving home from his daughter's piano recital. The city settled quietly for $45,000, with no admission of wrongdoing and no discipline for Hartley. The settlement included a confidentiality clause that kept it out of the press. The department knew about the pattern. The statistics were in their own databases. The complaints were in their own files. The previous lawsuit was in their own legal records, and they had done nothing. No retraining, no supervision, no consequences. They had allowed Kevin Hartley to continue patrolling, continue stopping, continue assuming that black men in nice cars were criminals until proven otherwise. And on this Saturday afternoon, that institutional failure was about to cost them everything. Darnell moved with deliberate slowness, announcing each action before he made it, the way his father had taught him, the way black parents across America teach their children to survive encounters with police. "I'm reaching for my wallet in my back pocket," he said, his voice steady. "My registration and insurance are in the glove compartment. I'm going to reach for them now." Hartley's body camera recorded every movement, Darnell's hands emerging with a leather wallet, the California driver's license with his photo, his name, his Riverside address, the vehicle registration showing the Dodge Challenger registered to Darnell L., Washington, at that same address, the insurance card from USAA, the military insurance company with matching information, every document legitimate, every detail aligned. Darnell held them out through the window, and the body camera captured Hartley taking the documents, glancing at them for less than 3 seconds, then looking back at Darnell with unchanged suspicion. "This doesn't prove the car isn't stolen," Hartley said, his voice dismissive. The audio recording captured his contempt clearly. "Anyone can fake paperwork." Darnell's hands returned to the steering wheel, gripping tighter now, the tension visible in his forearms. But his voice remained controlled, measured, the voice of a man who had learned to master his emotions in situations far more dangerous than this. "Officer, I'm wearing my Navy uniform." He gestured slightly toward his chest, toward the rows of ribbons, the gold warfare insignia, the senior chief collar devices. "I'm a senior chief petty officer in the United States Navy. I've served this country for 18 years, 3 combat deployments. I have 2 Bronze Stars and a Purple Heart." He paused, letting the words sink in. "The car is registered in my name. My license matches the registration. My insurance is valid. What more do you need?" The body camera captured Hartley's expression, unmoved, unimpressed, a man who had already decided the truth and would not be confused by evidence. "Get out of the vehicle," Hartley repeated, his hand still resting on his weapon. "Now." The word hung in the air, a command that left no room for discussion. Darnell looked at the documents still in Hartley's hand, documents that proved everything he had said, documents that meant nothing to a man who had already made up his mind. Darnell opened the door slowly, keeping his hands visible at all times. He stepped out of the Challenger and stood to his full height, 6 feet 2 inches of military bearing and quiet dignity. The afternoon California sun illuminated every detail of his dress blue uniform, the gold buttons gleaming, the ribbons arranged in perfect rows across his chest, the Seal Trident warfare insignia catching the light above his left pocket. He was the picture of American service, and he was being treated like a suspect. "Hands on the hood," Hartley ordered, gesturing toward the Challenger's front end. His body camera recorded the command, recorded Darnell's measured compliance, recorded the image of a decorated combat veteran placing his palms flat on the sun-warmed metal of his own car. "Am I being detained?" Darnell asked, his voice carrying the formal cadence of a man who understood legal terminology. "You're being investigated for possession of a stolen vehicle." "The vehicle isn't stolen." Darnell's voice remained steady, but an edge was creeping in, frustration breaking through 18 years of military discipline. "You have my registration. You have my license. You ran my plates before you pulled me over. You know it's not stolen. You haven't even called it in to verify." Hartley ignored him. The body camera recorded him stepping back, keying his radio, calling for backup. Unit 47 requesting backup at Riverside Heights, Morrison and Oak. Traffic stop, possible stolen vehicle, driver non-compliant. Non-compliant. The word was another lie, captured on audio. Darnell had complied with every order, had provided every document, had moved slowly, kept his hands visible, done everything right. And still he stood at the hood of his own car, palms down, metals pressed against the metal, being described as non-compliant to officers who would arrive expecting confrontation. The body camera continued recording. Darnell standing in full military dress, the Challenger gleaming behind him, the quiet residential street lined with expensive homes, a decorated Navy SEAL being treated like a car thief in broad daylight, in his own city, in his own neighborhood, for the crime of being black and successful. Should officers be required to verify stolen vehicle claims before making accusations? Comment below. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was racial profiling in action, captured frame by frame on the officer's own equipment. Officer Natalie Preston pulled up at 3:04 p.m., her patrol car stopping behind Hartley's cruiser. Her body camera activated automatically as she stepped out, providing a second angle of the scene that would later prove devastating in court. The footage from Preston's camera captured what she saw as she approached: a black man in full navy dress blues standing at the hood of a Dodge Challenger, hands flat on the metal, posture rigid but compliant. The afternoon sun caught his ribbons and medals, the gold seal trident unmistakable even from 20 feet away. Preston's camera recorded her pace slowing slightly, her head tilting as she processed what she was looking at. She walked up beside Hartley, positioning herself at an angle. Her body camera captured both men now, Darnell at the hood, Hartley standing with his hand still resting near his weapon. "What do we have?" Preston asked quietly, her voice low but clearly audible on both microphones. Hartley's response was captured on two body cameras simultaneously, from two different angles, with crystal clear audio that would later be played repeatedly in a federal courtroom. "Doesn't matter what he's wearing," Hartley said, gesturing dismissively toward Darnell's uniform. "These guys buy uniforms online all the time. Medals too. You can get all that stuff on eBay." He lowered his voice slightly, but not enough. Both microphones picked up every word. "Cars too expensive for the neighborhood he came from. The neighborhood he came from." The assumption embedded in those words that a black man couldn't legitimately own a $70,000 vehicle, that his presence in Riverside Heights must be an anomaly, an intrusion, a crime in progress. Preston's body camera captured her own reaction, the slight shift in her expression, the discomfort flickering across her face. She glanced at Darnell, at the uniform that represented 18 years of service to the country she had sworn to protect. Her camera recorded the moment she recognized that something was wrong with this stop, and then it recorded her silence. She said nothing. Didn't question Hartley's assumptions. Didn't point out that the documents had already verified ownership. Didn't intervene as her fellow officer continued to detain a man who had committed no crime. Her silence would cost her too. Hartley walked to the Challenger, leaned through the open driver's door, and located the VIN plate on the dashboard. His body camera recorded him calling it in, reading the 17-character sequence to dispatch, requesting verification against stolen vehicle databases. The response came back in less than 2 minutes. Unit 47, VIN comes back clean. Vehicle registered to Darnell, Washington, Riverside address. No stolen vehicle reports. No wants. No warrants. The words were captured on Hartley's body camera audio. Clear. Definitive. The car was not stolen, had never been reported stolen, was registered exactly as Darnell had said, to exactly the person Darnell had said, at exactly the address Darnell had provided. Every document was legitimate, every statement verified. Preston's camera captured her looking at Hartley, waiting. This was the moment to apologize, to return the documents, to let a decorated veteran go home to his family. The evidence had proven Darnell right and Hartley wrong, but Hartley had committed too far. His body camera recorded him walking back toward Darnell, his jaw set, his decision already made. He had accused this man of driving a stolen car. He had called for backup. He had made claims over the radio. To back down now would be to admit he had been wrong, that his instincts had been nothing more than prejudice dressed up as police work. "Turn around," Hartley said, pulling his handcuffs from his belt. "Hands behind your back." Darnell didn't move. "What am I being arrested for? You just confirmed the car is mine. What possible charge do you have? Failure to comply with a lawful order and obstruction of justice." "I complied with every order. I provided every document. Your own dispatch just confirmed I'm telling the truth. Turn around. Now." Last warning. Both body cameras recorded what happened next. Darnell, slowly turning. his hands moving behind his back, the metallic click of handcuffs closing around his wrists, his medals pressing into the hood of his own car as Hartley pushed him forward to secure the restraints. A decorated Navy SEAL, 2 Bronze Stars, a Purple Heart, 18 years of combat service, handcuffed beside his own verified vehicle for the crime of being black in America. Eleanor Griffin had lived on Morrison Street for 34 years. She had raised 3 children in the modest craftsman house across from where the Challenger now sat, had taught 6th grade at Riverside Elementary for 4 decades before retiring, had watched the neighborhood change and grow and evolve. At 67, she spent her Saturday afternoons on her front porch with sweet tea and a novel, enjoying the quiet of the tree-lined street. The flashing lights had drawn her attention first, then the scene itself. From her porch, she had a clear view of the traffic stop. A black man in what was unmistakably a military dress uniform, standing at the hood of a beautiful black car, hands flat on the metal, surrounded by 2 police officers. Something about the image felt deeply wrong, and Eleanor had learned to trust that feeling over 67 years of being a black woman in America. She pulled out her phone and began recording. Her footage, shaky but clear, provided a third angle that neither body camera captured. The wide shot, the full context, a residential street bathed in afternoon sunlight, 2 patrol cars with lights flashing, a man in navy blues being treated like a criminal while neighbors began emerging from their homes to watch. Eleanor's video captured the moments the body cameras couldn't fully convey. The way Darnell stood absolutely still, his posture military perfect even in humiliation. The way other neighbors stopped on the sidewalk, some pulling out their own phones, others simply staring in disbelief. The way the officer's body language radiated aggression, while the man they were detaining radiated nothing but controlled dignity. She recorded for 14 minutes until the patrol car pulled away with Darnell in the back seat. 8 months later, Eleanor Griffin would sit in a federal courtroom and tell the jury exactly what she witnessed. "He did everything right," she testified, her voice steady, her eyes meeting the jurors one by one. He kept his hands visible. He answered their questions calmly. He never raised his voice, never made sudden movements, never gave them any reason to feel threatened. "I've watched enough traffic stops from that porch to know the difference between someone resisting and someone complying. That man complied with everything." She paused, her decades of teaching lending weight to her words. "They arrested him anyway, because he was black and driving a nice car. That's the only reason. That's the only reason that makes any sense." The transport to Riverside Police Station took 11 minutes. Both officers' body cameras remained active, recording the drive through afternoon traffic, the radio chatter, the silence from the back seat where Darnell sat with his hands cuffed behind him, his dress uniform pressed against the hard plastic seat. At the station, the booking process was captured on multiple cameras. The intake area's ceiling-mounted surveillance system, Hartley's body camera, Preston's body camera. The footage showed Darnell being led through the doors, past the front desk, into the processing area where fingerprints and photographs awaited. The mugshot would later become iconic. A decorated Navy SEAL in full dress blues, ribbons and medals visible, SEAL trident gleaming, staring into the camera with an expression that mixed dignity with barely contained fury. Within 48 hours of its release, the image would be shared millions of times, a symbol of everything wrong with racial profiling in America. But in that moment, it was just another booking photo in a system that processed hundreds every week. Darnell was placed in a holding cell at 3:47 p.m. The charges listed on his paperwork: obstruction of justice, failure to comply with a lawful order, both fabricated from nothing, both contradicted by every second of body camera footage. He was held for 4 hours. What the official record didn't capture, but the booking area's audio system did, was the conversation among officers in the processing area after Darnell was led to his cell. "You see that guy Hartley brought in?" one officer said, his voice clearly audible on the preserved audio. "Says he's a Navy SEAL." Laughter, multiple voices. "Nice costume," another officer responded. "Where'd he get it, Party City?" "Probably bought the medals on Amazon. 2-day shipping on fake Bronze Stars." More laughter. The audio was preserved on the station's recording system, time-stamped and archived according to department policy. The officers didn't know it then, but their mockery of a man who had earned every ribbon through blood and sacrifice would be played for a jury, would be reported in national media, would become evidence of the institutional contempt that had allowed Kevin Hartley to operate unchecked for 11 years. At 7:52 p.m., Simone Washington arrived with Robert Okafor, a civil rights attorney who had received her frantic call 3 hours earlier. The charges were reviewed. Bail was posted, and Darnell walked out of the Riverside police station still wearing his dress blues, his wrists marked red from the handcuffs. His faith in the system he had served for 18 years shattered. The charges against Darnell Washington were dropped 71 hours after his arrest, not because the Riverside Police Department had reviewed the evidence and recognized their mistake, not because someone in the chain of command had watched the body camera footage and understood the magnitude of what had happened. The charges were dropped because the United States Navy made a phone call. Captain James Holloway, Darnell's commanding officer at Naval Special Warfare Command, learned of the arrest Monday morning when the story began circulating among the teams. By noon, he had confirmed every detail of Darnell's service record: 18 years as a Navy SEAL, 3 combat deployments, 2 Bronze Stars with Valor, a Purple Heart, an impeccable record of service to his country. By 2 p.m., Captain Holloway was on the phone with Riverside Police Chief Donald Mercer. The conversation was brief. "You have one of my senior chiefs in your system," Holloway said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who had commanded special operations forces in 6 countries, a man who has bled for this nation. Your officers arrested him for driving his own car. I suggest you fix this immediately, before this becomes a conversation between your mayor and the Secretary of the Navy. The charges were dismissed by 5 p.m. But dismissal couldn't undo what had already begun. The mugshot had leaked. Someone at the station, perhaps appalled by what they had witnessed, had shared the booking photo with a local reporter. By Tuesday morning, the image was everywhere. A decorated Navy SEAL in immaculate dress blues, medals gleaming, staring into a booking camera. The photograph required no caption. The injustice was self-evident. Local news covered it first, then regional outlets, then national networks: CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. The story transcended political divisions because the facts were undeniable. Body camera footage, a verified vehicle, a fabricated charge, a uniform that represented everything America claimed to honor, treated as a costume by officers who saw only skin color. The Navy issued a formal statement Wednesday afternoon. Senior Chief Petty Officer Darnell Washington is a distinguished member of Naval Special Warfare with an exemplary 18-year service record. The Navy stands fully behind Senior Chief Washington and finds the circumstances of his arrest deeply troubling. By Thursday, fellow SEALs from across the country had organized. 47 operators, active duty and retired, released a joint statement of solidarity. Darnell Washington has saved American lives in combat. He has earned every honor he wears. That he was treated as a criminal in his own country is a disgrace that demands accountability. The pressure was building, and Darnell Washington was just getting started. Attorney Reginald Foster had spent 12 years as a JAG officer before transitioning to civil rights law. He had prosecuted military justice cases around the world, defended service members facing court-martial, and developed a reputation for meticulous preparation and devastating cross-examination. When Darnell Washington's story broke nationally, Foster reached out within hours. Their first meeting lasted 4 hours. Foster reviewed the body camera footage frame by frame, taking notes, his expression growing darker with each passing minute. When it was over, he looked at Darnell across the conference table. "This is one of the clearest cases of racial profiling I've ever seen," Foster said. "And I've seen a lot. They recorded their own misconduct. Every lie, every assumption, every constitutional violation captured on their own equipment. We're going to make them answer for all of it." The federal lawsuit was filed 6 weeks later in the United States District Court for the Central District of California. Darnell Washington v. City of Riverside, Officer Kevin Hartley and Officer Natalie Preston. The complaint ran 47 pages and alleged violations that struck at the heart of constitutional policing. Fourth Amendment violation, unlawful seizure without probable cause or reasonable suspicion, false arrest, detention and arrest based on fabricated charges contradicted by the officer's own evidence. Racial profiling, discriminatory enforcement based solely on race, conspiracy to deprive civil rights under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983, intentional infliction of emotional distress. But the complaint was only the beginning. Discovery revealed what the department had hidden for years. Foster's team subpoenaed Hartley's complete personnel file, his stop records, his complaint history. They obtained internal affairs files for all 7 prior complaints. They pulled statistical data on every traffic stop Hartley had conducted over 5 years, and they found the emails. In 2019, a sergeant had flagged Hartley's disproportionate stops of black drivers to the lieutenant overseeing patrol operations. The lieutenant's response, preserved in department email archives. Hartley's numbers are solid. Some friction is inevitable with proactive policing, not worth pursuing. In 2021, after the quiet $45,000 settlement with Jerome Patterson, the same lieutenant had written to the chief's office. Recommend closing matter with no further action. Settlement was precautionary, not admission of wrongdoing. Hartley remains an effective officer. The pattern was documented in the department's own records. They had known, they had chosen to look away. And now, with body camera footage making denial impossible, they would face the consequences of that choice. The trial began on a Monday morning in October, 14 months after Darnell Washington was handcuffed beside his own car. The federal courthouse in downtown Riverside was packed from the first day, civil rights advocates and veterans groups filling the gallery, national media occupying the press section, the weight of public attention pressing down on every participant. Reginald Foster had prepared for this moment with the same precision Darnell brought to military operations. 3 weeks of testimony, carefully sequenced to build an unassailable case. The body camera footage was played on the trial's second day. Both recordings, Hartley's and Preston's, synchronized on split screens so the jury could watch the same moments from 2 angles. The gallery sat in absolute silence as the scene unfolded. Hartley's approach with his hand on his weapon, his demand for documents, his lie about the stolen vehicle report, his dismissal of Darnell's credentials, his comment about uniforms being available online, the handcuffs clicking shut. Eleanor Griffin's phone video was played immediately after, providing the wide shot that showed the full context. A quiet residential street. A man in military dress standing in dignified compliance. An arrest that made no sense unless you understood that the only probable cause was the color of Darnell's skin. Foster called expert witnesses who explained racial profiling with academic precision. A criminologist presented statistical analysis of Hartley's stop patterns, demonstrating that black drivers in expensive vehicles were stopped at 6 times the rate of white drivers in comparable cars. A former police chief testified about proper procedure, explaining that Hartley had violated department policy, state law, and constitutional protections at every stage of the encounter. Then Darnell took the stand. He wore his dress blues, the same uniform he had worn the day of his arrest. The ribbons, the medals, the seal trident, all present, all earned through sacrifice the jury could only imagine. He sat straight in the witness chair, his voice steady as Foster guided him through his testimony. He spoke about enlisting at 18, about surviving BUD-S training, about his first deployment to Afghanistan. He spoke about the friends he had lost, the missions he had completed, the flag-draped coffins he had helped carry. He spoke about buying the Challenger as a promise to himself, a reward for surviving when so many hadn't. And then he spoke about that Saturday afternoon. "I did everything my father taught me to do," Darnell said, his voice thick with controlled emotion. "Hands on the wheel. No sudden movements. Yes, sir. No, sir. I showed him my license, my registration, my insurance. I told him about my service. I pointed to my uniform, my medals, everything I had earned over 18 years of serving this country." He paused, looking directly at the jury. "I've faced enemy combatants in 3 different countries. Men who wanted to kill me and my teammates. And I can tell you honestly, some of them treated me with more respect than Officer Hartley did that afternoon. At least they saw me as a worthy adversary. He just saw a black man who couldn't possibly belong. The defense attorney argued that Hartley had made a reasonable mistake based on an anonymous tip about stolen vehicles in the area. Foster dismantled the claim in closing arguments. "What anonymous tip?" he asked the jury. "There's no record of any tip. Officer Hartley ran those plates before the stop, and they came back clean. He fabricated probable cause on the spot, and when every piece of evidence proved him wrong, he arrested Senior Chief Washington anyway. That's not a mistake. That's not even negligence. That's willful discrimination captured on video by the officer's own camera." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. 6 hours to review 3 weeks of testimony. 6 hours to watch the body camera footage one final time. 6 hours to weigh the evidence and reach a decision that would echo far beyond the Riverside courthouse. When they filed back into the courtroom at 4:47 p.m., the gallery fell silent. Darnell sat at the plaintiff's table in his dress uniform, Simone beside him in the row behind, her hand resting on his shoulder. Foster stood, his legal pad blank, his preparation complete. There was nothing left to do but wait for the words. The jury foreman, a middle-aged accountant from Riverside's east side, rose with the verdict form in his hands. "On the claim of Fourth Amendment violation against Officer Kevin Hartley, we, the jury, find the defendant liable." A murmur rippled through the gallery. "On the claim of false arrest against Officer Kevin Hartley, we find the defendant liable." Simone's grip tightened on Darnell's shoulder. "On the claim of racial profiling against Officer Kevin Hartley, we find the defendant liable. On the claim of conspiracy to deprive civil rights against the city of Riverside, we find the defendant liable. On the claim of intentional infliction of emotional distress against all defendants, we find the defendants liable. Liable on all counts. Every charge sustained. Every violation confirmed." The damages came next. On compensatory damages for emotional distress, reputational harm, lost wages, and humiliation, we award the plaintiff $430,000. Foster wrote the number on his pad. $430,000 on punitive damages specifically calculated to punish the city of Riverside for its failure to address Officer Hartley's documented pattern of discriminatory enforcement. We award the plaintiff $500,000. $500,000. A message sent directly to the department's leadership. Total award, $930,000. The courtroom erupted. Cheers from the gallery, cameras flashing despite the judge's orders, reporters rushing toward the exits to file their stories. Darnell sat motionless for a long moment, processing the verdict, feeling Simone's arms wrap around him from behind. Justice. Incomplete, imperfect, bought at a cost no amount of money could fully repay. But justice nonetheless. The consequences followed swiftly. Kevin Hartley was terminated within 24 hours, his 11-year career ending in disgrace. Natalie Preston was suspended for 60 days without pay and permanently reassigned to desk duty. Her silence during the stop deemed a failure to intervene in a clear constitutional violation. The city of Riverside announced comprehensive reforms the following week. Mandatory implicit bias training for all officers, revised protocols requiring verification before any stolen vehicle accusations, civilian oversight committee with authority to review body camera footage, and a public database tracking all traffic stops by race, location, and outcome. The reforms came too late for Darnell Washington. But perhaps, because of what he endured, they would come in time for someone else. Darnell Washington received the settlement check 6 weeks after the verdict, after the city of Riverside exhausted its appeals and accepted that the judgment would stand. $930,000 minus attorney fees, deposited into an account he had never wanted to open, compensation for a wrong that never should have occurred. He could have kept it all. No one would have blamed him. He had earned that money through humiliation, through trauma, through the violation of rights he had spent 18 years defending. But Darnell Washington had never served his country for personal gain, and he wasn't about to start now. He donated $200,000 to veteran support organizations, splitting the contribution between groups that helped wounded warriors transition to civilian life and those that provided mental health services to operators struggling with the invisible scars of combat. He knew those scars. He had watched friends succumb to them. The money wouldn't save everyone, but it might save someone. With another $150,000, he established the Washington Legal Defense Fund, providing free legal representation to service members facing discrimination. The fund partnered with civil rights organizations across the country, creating a network of attorneys ready to take cases that most lawyers considered too difficult or too controversial. Within its first year, the fund assisted 23 veterans who had faced racial profiling, housing discrimination, or employment bias. Darnell reviewed every case personally, remembering what it felt like to stand alone against a system that had already decided you were guilty. His Navy career continued. 2 years after the trial, Senior Chief Petty Officer Darnell Washington was promoted to Master Chief, the highest enlisted rank in the Navy. The ceremony took place at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, attended by his family, his teammates, and Captain Holloway, who had made that phone call to the Riverside Police Chief years earlier. As the new anchors were pinned to his collar, Darnell thought about the journey that had brought him here. The sacrifices, the losses, the Saturday afternoon when everything he had earned meant nothing to a man who saw only his skin color. Kevin Hartley appealed his termination twice. Both appeals were denied. The body camera footage left no room for argument, no space for alternative interpretation. His own equipment had documented his bias, his lies, his constitutional violations. He was barred from law enforcement permanently, his name entered into a national database of decertified officers. The last anyone heard, he was working private security in Nevada, a fallen guardian stripped of the authority he had so thoroughly abused. The case of Darnell Washington v. City of Riverside became required study in police academies across the nation. Instructors played the body camera footage for recruits, pausing at key moments, asking cadets to identify where Hartley went wrong. The lesson was clear. Body cameras protect good officers who follow the law, but they expose those who believe their badges place them above it. Technology meant to build public trust had instead revealed the rot that trust was meant to conceal. Civil rights organizations cited the case in policy papers and legislative testimony. 3 states passed laws strengthening civilian oversight of body camera footage. The Department of Justice referenced the Washington verdict in new guidelines for federal law enforcement training. Something had shifted, incrementally, imperfectly, but perceptibly. On the first anniversary of the verdict, Darnell held a press conference outside the Riverside courthouse. Simone stood beside him, along with Kayla and Destiny, now teenagers who understood what their father had endured and what it meant. Reporters crowded the steps, cameras rolling, microphones extended. Darnell wore his dress blues one final time for the cameras. The same uniform he had worn the day of his arrest, the same uniform he had worn on the witness stand. The ribbons, the medals, the sealed trident, the new Master Chief anchors on his collar, everything he had earned, displayed for a nation still struggling to see past the color of his skin. He spoke without notes, his voice carrying across the crowd with the quiet authority of a man who had led warriors into combat and emerged to tell the story. "I've bled for this country," he said. "I've buried friends for this country. I've missed birthdays, anniversaries, and years of my daughter's lives serving this country. And on a Saturday afternoon in my own city, wearing the uniform of the United States Navy, I had to prove I deserved to drive my own car home." He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. "That's not the America I fought for. That's not the America my teammates died for. That's not the America I want my daughters to inherit." His voice strengthened, carrying hope alongside the pain. "But maybe, because of what happened, because we fought back, because the truth was recorded and couldn't be denied, maybe this can become the America we build. Not the America that arrests its heroes for driving while black, but the America that holds accountable those who betray the badge. the America that sees service before skin color, the America that lives up to the ideals we send young men and women to die for. He looked directly into the cameras, into living rooms across the nation, into the future he was trying to shape. I'm not done serving. None of us should be. The fight continues, and it's worth fighting. Because every child deserves to grow up in a country where wearing your nation's uniform means something, where driving your own car home isn't a crime, where justice isn't just a word we put on buildings, but a promise we keep to every citizen. He stepped back from the microphones, took Simone's hand, gathered his daughters close. The cameras continued rolling as the Washington family walked away from the courthouse, toward the car Darnell had every right to drive, toward the home he had every right to return to, toward the future he would spend the rest of his life building. This case was disturbing, but the one on the right ends in a way no one expects.
We exist to pursue the truth, no matter where it leads. It is our duty to hold power to account and shine a light on the facts. After all, the records don't lie. Thanks for watching and joining the conversation.